Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Rebellious Wellness Lifestyle. Today, my guest is Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. She is a medical professional with many degrees, but she currently does the future of medicine, gives it to people today. She comes from an orthopedic background. She's done all kinds of sports medicine, sports orthopedics, rehab, 30 years of practicing as a specialist in sports and spine medicine. And today I find her doing more anti-aging, regenerative, and cellular medicine, which is something I'm really interested in. And I bet you listening would love to know what's real in the world of anti-aging, pro-aging, regenerative, right? There are so many terms. So Dr. Yurth, welcome. We're happy to have you here.
Thanks so much, Greg. Again.
Tell the listeners briefly your journey from I always wanted to be a doctor, you went into sports medicine, you wanted to help people get better, and then you found you weren't with your tools that you were taught.
That's exactly right. You're right. I went to orthopedics thinking, oh gosh, healthy people, that's easy. We can just fix people and get them better. And I practiced orthopedics for 30 years. I still do, but I do it in a very different fashion. What I found, and this probably started 20 years ago now, is I just felt like, wow, most people, we'd fix something and it would get a little worse and you'd stick steroids in it and you'd do something and then eventually they'd have a joint replacement. And that was from an initial injury to joint replacement was what we did. And I thought, geez, this is not really working because I'm not really fixing anybody. All I'm doing is patching them together until ultimately we replace a joint, which could be a life-saving surgery, but not the ideal thing. Nobody's perfect after they have a joint replacement. So I really started to explore how can we use other techniques? How can we use nutritional medicine, hormonal medicine, other things that would help us to heal better, more efficiently, and hopefully prevent that degradative process. And so I started to learn that actually this whole degenerative thing that we've always thought joints just wore out, kind of like we wear out tires, was completely untrue. And that honestly, it's a disease process, just like any disease. And just like your brain shouldn't wear out, your heart shouldn't wear out, neither should your joints. So this is an inflammatory disease. So I started to learn a lot more about that and started to lead the way a little bit in trying to teach that we shouldn't have this ultimate decline in our joint health, that we just accept it as normal. I just saw a patient yesterday. She had a neck fusion and she's the ultimate, I'm just going to have another fusion and my neck's going to keep falling apart. I'm like, it's not true. Honestly, you can actually get your joints back to healthy. You can have no joint pain, and you should. So this is a disease process. So I started to go back, relearned all this medicine, started to understand this a lot better from going through functional medicine and then cellular medicine, understanding all these pathways and how it can actually help people. So I wore two hats. I did orthopedics all day, and then I had my functional medicine clinic at night until really literally about 5 years ago. And then I was just brought it all together. I said, I can't do both of these jobs at once. I felt like every time I was doing my orthopedic practice, I was not doing what I should be for the patients. They were in a knee in 15-minute appointments. So brought it all to one place, our Boulder Longevity Institute, where we do a lot of regenerative orthopedics, but also just total health, right? Even our people who come in with a hurt knee end up learning about hormones, nutrition, and things like that.
Yeah, I know that you also bring epigenetics into your work. And my listeners probably already know what epigenetics is, everything that influences us outside of the cell, right?
Exactly.
Basically. So the environment inside our body is influenced by the environment around our body and what we put into our body. So you teach people those kinds of things as well?
Exactly. We all got pretty gigged out on genomics, right? Everybody gave their genetic profiles. And what you know is that genetics, yes, it's helpful, but ultimately your genes are a very small part of the story. And ultimately it's how those genes are expressed, which is dependent on all the things that you do take or expose to. Lifestyle. What is your sleep like? What are you eating? How are you exercising? Because that's going to change the genetics. And so now actually we used to do a lot of genetic testing and now we do a lot more with what we call metabolomics. Because what you know is that genes are epigenetically, then they make a protein. So they're encoded, they're epigenetically modified, they make a protein, and then that protein is modified and becomes a metabolite. And the metabolites are ultimately what are dictating your overall health. So what we're doing now a lot more is working on these big, huge metabolic marker profiles that we can actually really look at health on not just what your genes say, but what you're actually expressing. So it's very interesting, and we can really do very fine tuning that way on saying, gosh, we really need to focus on this or this in people. But what I've learned mostly is that health is actually pretty simplistic and that our cells are super, super smart. And they're really designed to try and heal, to try and get over anything. We're pretty good at being able to do that. And sometimes less is more. We shouldn't have to throw 10 billion supplements into the mix to try and get ourselves better. I think of ourselves a little bit like raising kids. And I have 5 kids, and the key is you want to obviously guide them and help them, but you don't want to overpower them or squelch them because they're not going to do very well. So almost the same thing with ourselves. We have to really give the supportive environment and they'll be able to do the right thing.
Yeah, I like that. So you mentioned supplements. There's a huge world of supplements out there, and some of the ones that I'm really interested in, I know you have expertise in. One is spermidine. I just started reading about it a few months ago. And then there's NAD for nitric oxide. And then right there are these, like, I don't know, the top 10 hot supplements. How does a person know where to prioritize if we don't want to take everything?
A lot of it comes down to always look at the very basic things you absolutely 100% need. And that's going to be simple things like vitamin D3 with K2, because that enhances the absorption of vitamin D3 and makes it more efficient. So D3 with K2, magnesium, because everybody is depleting magnesium. It's not in our soil anymore. It's not in our food sources anymore. It's almost impossible to have enough magnesium in our diet. So almost everybody, at least 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium. So you need D3, K2, you need magnesium, you need some basic B vitamins. Those may be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on how you live. So you need some pretty simple, basic things. And then the next step is to look at things that we know decline with age, right? So those are things that everybody needs no matter what. And then there's things that we know we have in our body, but they get less and less and less with time. The way I approach longevity medicine is replace the things that are being lost. So first, that's going to be hormones, right? So our hormones start dropping young, usually in our 20s to 30s. You start seeing some hormonal changes in both men and women. So starting to look at hormones, replacing things as they start to be lost. The earlier, the better. Remember, we know with hormone replacement that if you can start at an earlier age, it's going to be beneficial no matter what age. But the earlier you can start keeping hormones stable, the better off. So that might be even in your early 30s that women may need a little bit of progesterone or testosterone, right? Or men may need some testosterone support. So basically, we start dropping our hormones much earlier than we think. If we can keep them at a nice, healthy, young person level, even at the very start, we're not going to actually see some of the degradation versus starting your hormones when you're 50, where there's already been some loss, right? So hormones is going to be number one. But then I look at things in our cells that we know also drop. And one of that you spoke about was NAD, or nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. Okay, so what is NAD? That's a critical coenzyme found in every cell of your body, right? Every single cell relies on NAD. And it's involved not in just energy production, so making ATP, but in DNA repair, in a whole bunch of metabolic processes. So think of it as the currency for every energy transaction that goes on in your body. So it is absolutely 100% undeniably critical. And we know that by age 50, we have about half the NAD that we had when we were in our 20s. Wow. And by the time we're 80, we're down to maybe 10% of that. And so we think about NAD as the cellular energy currency. That 50% drop means I have 50% less energy. That 80% drop means I have 80% less energy. So people have started just saying, okay, I'm going to give back NAD, which intuitively makes sense. My NAD is dropping. I'm going to put NAD back into the system. The problem with that, and we're going to start seeing trouble, I can promise you, is that it's not as simple as the levels just keep dropping. The problem with why they are dropping is not because we're making less. It's because we're draining it. We basically have upregulation of these enzymes. So picture a bucket that you're filling up with water, but that bucket has a hole in it. In our bodies, that hole is called an enzyme called NNMT, which is a methyltransferase enzyme that methylates the NAD. And so as we age, or if we're sick, or if we have cancer, or if we're overly stressed, if we're a young person, you'll see much higher levels of this enzyme. And the enzyme is actually trying to help you out. It's trying to get the NAD levels to something else. But it's actually draining the NAD It's also stealing all of your methyl groups, which you need for a whole bunch of detoxification pathways. So now people keep filling this bucket, right? They take NAD or NR or NMN, all these precursors that have become extremely possible. Just everybody's using them. The NAD infusions, you can walk to your local IV bar and get an NAD infusion. So what are you doing? So if I'm pouring water into this bucket with a hole in it, what's happening? If it's a bucket with a hole in it and you're on your wood floor, it's ruining the wood floor. But in our bodies, what's happening is that NMTs, number one, stealing a lot of our really important methyl groups that are so important for longevity. But number two, the byproduct of that is something called 4-pyridone. 4-pyridone is bad. It's equated to cardiovascular disease, cerebral vascular disease. So what we're seeing is people have very high levels of these 4-pyridones over time who are using a lot of these NAD and NAD precursors. And so they're thinking too simplistically. I can't just fill the bucket. I have to plug the hole. So what's a better way of doing this is to use things that block that enzyme. So something called 1-methylnicotinamide or 1-MNA that actually blocks the enzyme. So plugs the hole. So I can maybe use a little bit of NAD or NAD precursors. That's okay if I want to do it now. And then at the same time, block this enzyme that's degrading it. And we know that this 1-MNA also has the ability to act almost like NAD. It's a supportive structure to acting like NAD. So a much better way to do what we want, raise the NAD levels, is to work with how the body would do it, which is blocking this bad enzyme that is accelerated as I age. So people think too simplistically. It's never as simplistic as something's low, I'm going to put more into the system and make it high again.
Yeah.
The body doesn't inherently just stop making NAD. That doesn't make sense. But this enzyme gets higher and higher with age. So if you look at this enzyme, it's equated to every bad disease in the book. And all people are doing when they're taking these NAD and NAD precursors. So and I'm not going to say you should never do NAD precursors or NAD. If you've had a really stressful time, if you just ran a marathon, if you just had COVID, it's not a bad thing. But you always want to block the enzyme at the same time. So I want people to start thinking about these cells as in these really homeostatic states. And we have to be super, super careful not to screw that up, okay? And then he talks about spermidine. So spermidine is also a naturally occurring polyamine. I'm a big fan of things that are naturally occurring in our body, right? 1-methylnicotinamide our body makes. B12, magnesium our body makes. Things that the body has are probably more important than things that we're just adding into the mix, right? So spermidine is a natural occurring polyamine, and it's found in every one of your cells. So just like NAD, it is found in every one of your cells. And just like NAD, the levels significantly decline as we age, okay? And it's a little unclear why. We know that you can get spermidine from diet, so it is available in certain foods like soybeans, wheat germ, some fermented foods. So it is available. Higher polyamine diets like the Mediterranean diet, those people are going to have higher spermidine levels. But why does it decline with age? Probably it gets used up. Because what makes it so valuable is it's part of your cleanup crew. So a lot of you guys have heard about what we call autophagy, all right? Autophagy is your cell's cleaning mechanism. So when a cell has enough damage to it, it's pretty smart, and it actually kills itself. And it kills itself and it recycles the good stuff, so we don't have these damaged cells sitting around. If these damaged cells sit around, they're called zombie cells. And it's a perfect name for them, because their zombie cells are filled with all of these what we call secretory associated senescent proteins or phenotype, and those start spewing out of the cell, and they actually turn the healthy cells around them into zombies. So if you look at a baby, they have no zombie cells. If you look at me, who's in my 60s, I have a lot of zombie cells, right? So our goal would be to try and get rid of those bad cells. So we want to enhance this process of the cell killing itself and recycling, this process of autophagy. So that's one of the things spermidine does. It's this natural inducer of triggering the cellular cleaning process. So again, declines when I age, I can put that back in to encourage autophagy. Now, should I do that all the time? I really don't want to never accumulate any trash. Think about your house. If you never accumulate any trash, you're probably not eating or cooking or doing anything fun, right?
Yeah.
But if you never took out your trash, your house would look like a hoarder. So the same thing's true with our cells. So usually when we're doing things like spermidine, like autophagy-inducing agents, things like that, what you'd like to do is cycle them. Take them on and off, a little bit higher dose. So I encourage my cells to get rid of bad stuff, but then I go back to a little state of homeostasis, let the cell balance back out, do that again. So I love the whole process when you're thinking about any of these things as using them in sort of periodic fashions.
And periodic would be a month on, a month off, or 6 months on, 6 months
Probably
off?
6 week cycles is a good cycle. So maybe 6 weeks on and then 6 weeks off.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could take a low dose spermidine all the time, and that's not going to hurt you. You probably need a little higher dose to induce that autophagy effect. So that lower dose all the time might just have some beneficial effects because we know spermidine is equated to healthier lifestyles. So especially if you're not eating a diet that's high in some of these foods like natto or certain mushrooms or wheat germ, then you might want to take a little bit all the time. So I take 2 little capsules all the time, but then I take a higher dose, like 6 of the caps, and I'll do that for a 6-week period and then go back to my nice low dose.
Mm-hmm. L-glutamine is one of those popular supplements. People want to take L-glutamine to replace what they're losing because it's the energy powerhouse, whatever it is. But my understanding is you can't just take a capsule of L-glutamine and have it do anything in your body. So how do we get more?
Right. There's always a reason L-glutamine is low, right? So typically when glutamine is low, there's a gut problem. So you're utilizing glutamine, and typically there's something wrong with the gut. The gut is at the root of a lot of issues in our bodies. So if there's one place to always blame, go after the gut, because the gut is so important. It's what makes 90% of your immune cells. It's important for serotonin production. So turning tryptophan into serotonin so we have good moods and can sleep well. So the gut is always, so basically if glutamine levels are low, it very often is there's some type of gut inflammation going on. So putting glutamine back in maybe temporarily could help, but you've got to get to the root of where the problem is and figure out why it would be low. Because glutamine shouldn't just drop as we age. It drops because we have these unhealthy gut microbiomes and unhealthy gut linings and mucosa of our gut. So glutamate is toxic to the brain. So if I have now too high of levels, I'm going to actually get some glutamate toxicity and I will actually get some brain stuff. So it's a key piece is that when something is low, I mean, there's things like spermidine that are dietary, but usually when something's low, there's something going on. So you got to get a little deeper. Yeah, I have a very low threshold in my patients to go look at the gut. If you're anxious, if you're depressed, if you're not sleeping, if you've got brain fog, I'm going to look at the basics. I'm going to look at your hormones and your thyroid and your nutrients, and then I'm going to go after your gut.
Can we actually keep our telomeres from shortening by taking something?
I don't think so, nor do I think we have a very good way of measuring telomere length. Okay. When you look at these tests that measure telomere length, the telomeres are different in every single cell. So your telomeres are different in your immune cells than in another cell. I will tell you the study just got published where they did a very extensive analysis of a woman who was 112 years old. And they looked at every marker you could think of, right? To look at what was the most important thing. She actually had extremely short telomeres. Now she's one case. Wow. It would be nice to look at that in all the centenarians, but she had really short telomeres. So does telomere length make a difference? Does it not? I think it's going to depend on what cell you're talking about. I don't know that we can truly measure it correctly. There's a lot of things that if I'm measuring something in the serum versus inside a cell, which is where I need to know it, then what am I measuring? I don't know. And we know that telomeres in your brain cells is different than telomeres in your immune cells and different than telomeres in your muscle cells. So I don't know that we know what we're looking at enough to really make a determination whether even taking some kind of supplement that may or may not help is going to be beneficial. It's not where I would spend my energy and my money, frankly.
Aside from these supplements, you talk about regenerative medicine. Stem cells, does that count? What would you say?
Sure, stem cells is a type of regenerative medicine. When we look at regenerative medicine, basically it's giving back cells some of the growth factors, microRNAs, messenger RNAs that they need to replace themselves to heal. As we get older, we can't do that as well. So as I get older, if I injure myself, like if a 12-year-old breaks his arm, it heals right up. If I break my arm, it's going to take me months. So why is that? It's because I don't create as much of these growth factors anymore. So all of our stem cells, so we have stem cells in our bone marrow, in our fat tissue that are always there. And the stem cells contain what are called exosomes. And exosomes are the working part of the stem cell. So exosomes are these little nanoparticles inside the stem cells that package up all of these growth factors and messenger RNAs and microRNAs that kind of encode for making a new human. So what happens is when the stem cell goes out, it really releases these exosomes out of it. The exosomes attach to other cells and they encode the cells what to do. So when you're doing stem cell therapies, it's really exosomes that are of value there, right? We don't really need all the other information in the stem cell. We need the exosomes. So you can take stem cells from yourself, basically from fat, from bone marrow. The problem is that as you get to be older, your own stem cells, and this was a great study out of China, where they found that your own stem cells contained more of these zombie cells. We used to think stem cells did not age, but they actually found that there was actually zombie cells in these stem cells. So when they actually put these, and they did it with chondrocytes, with cartilage cells, when they took these stem cells from an older animal, they used mice, but from an older mouse, and they actually put them near young chondrocytes, initially it created this little inflammatory progressive proliferative response, but then it actually started damaging the cells around it. So when you do your own stem cells, you have to be very careful to make sure you do this autophagy, get rid of all the bad cells that you can. And my belief is that we're better off using younger cells. Now, umbilical stem cells, but umbilical stem cells aren't legal here in the US. You can travel somewhere else and get them. But the thing about stem cells to me is there's a lot of information there that I don't want. What I really want is the exosomes. Mm-hmm. So what we do a lot of is using a placental source of exosomes. So you can use umbilical or placental exosomes. And those are basically a byproduct of the cells. So much like milk, they can't be as regulated. And so it's a byproduct secreted by the cells that you can isolate. And then you can use a cloned line so you always know what you're getting. So that's what I prefer. And then you can combine that with things like platelet-rich plasma, platelet-rich fibrin matrix. So what we'll do is, let's say you hurt your cartilage in your knee. We'll go in there under ultrasound guidance. We'll take some of your platelets. We'll actually mix them with some stuff to make a little fibrin clot out of the platelets. And we'll place that over the torn cartilage. And then we'll put exosomes on top of that. And the exosomes now are going to be absorbed through this matrix that we made and help to regenerate these chondrocytes, these cells, so that you actually get nice, new, healthy cartilage cells. And by using these more placental or umbilical sources, you don't have the risk factor of having any of these bad proteins that we don't want. And it works extremely well. But you can also even run them IV. Exosomes are really smart, and they're cold to places where there's damage. They cross the blood-brain barrier, so they can even be run IV for neurodegenerative conditions and things like that. So that's where we go with regenerative, but we do a lot of other things. There's something called alpha-2 macroglobulin, which is a little protein that your body makes that is designed to heal things, but you don't have enough of it as you get older. So we actually can isolate that out of your blood, inject it into a joint, inject it into your spine. So alpha-2 macroglobulin is another really cool thing. And then we use just a lot of, when we're trying to regenerate people, peptide therapies, because peptide therapies are, again, your body's own way of healing is to produce these peptides. And just like hormones drop when we age, so do our peptides.
Wow. There's a lot there at the Boulder Institute. Now, one thing that people who don't live near Boulder or aren't going to travel there to work with you in person, you have the Human Optimization Academy. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Because we started Human Optimization Academy, maybe 4 years ago now. 4 or 5 years ago. And we started because I got a little bit frustrated that I felt like people were learning a lot not from science. Right? So, and it's very hard because there's all these people who hear something and then they get on Instagram and they talk about it and it actually sounds amazing. And the question is it based in science or not? Yeah. And it's where you really have to have a much deeper understanding of pathways and scientific literature. So I spend at least 2 hours every day. I put 2 hours out of every day to read new literature, new product. And then my goal is to teach that to other people because I don't expect everybody to go read 2 hours of scientific literature or be able to digest it. But I can then take that information and teach people it. I can teach people from science. So what we're trying to do with Human Optimization Academy is make people be able to be their own doctors, right? We teach them how to understand their own labs. We teach them how to read literature, how to put that literature to play in their own lives. And then we do these Q&A sessions where we have these big, long discussions about all these cool things that we can do, and everything from hormones to peptides to nutrients and supplements. So we have courses on there that are how to read your own labs, because I can tell you your doctor's going to look at your labs and say, hey, these look fine.
Yeah.
You can look at your labs and go, actually, that's not fine. That's not fine. That's not fine.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to do that. You guys have to be able to advocate for yourselves. You have to be able to know what you're looking at. So we teach you how to read their own and metabolic panels and hormone panels and know, and then be able to find a provider that they can work with, not have a provider treat them, but work together as a team so that you guys can actually really take control of your health and feel better. So that's what the whole course is designed to do.
Yeah, it sounds great. I really think that I'm hoping that's the future of medicine, where we get to work with practitioners.
It shouldn't be somebody just saying, do this, and having doctors then tell patients, I get this all the time, oh, Dr. Google told you that. I mean, I encourage my patients to go Google things, right? I want them to go Google and learn and then discuss with me. It's not going to be that everything learned on Google is something I believe in, but maybe it's something I don't know and they can teach me. I encourage them, hey, bring me the articles. Let's go through them together. If I trust it, then certainly I'm willing to do that. So that's how medicine should be, right? You have somebody you're working together with. If there's things you really want to do and try, you can discuss the pros and cons of it with somebody and not have somebody just go, there's no proof of that. Just Google tells you that.
So is there anything you wish I'd asked you that I have not yet?
Let's see. I think one of the things I really want people, because I think we get very caught up in what is the thing we can take for longevity, right? Mm-hmm. What is that magic pill? And rapamycin's gotten a lot of play. Yes. Rapamycin is the magic pill. And I believe in rapamycin. I think it is going to have some value. It's working on what's called mechanistic target of rapamycin. It blocks this by sitting in this mTOR receptor. We extend lifespan. So I do think there's value in a lot of these things. But if you look at the top 3 predictors of longevity, it has nothing to do with all the stuff we talked about, which I think is hugely important. I think it's hugely important to replace your hormones and to take peptides that replace mitochondrial function and repair processes. But if you did nothing, the number 1 predictor is your socialization, right? Mm-hmm. People you interact with, that's becoming less and less, right? Nobody goes to their workplace anymore. People, if they have people in their lives, it's a couple of people. You actually need more than a couple of people in your life. You need to have interactions with people, and actually people of all ages. So you need people, younger people with you and older people with you. And that's the number 1 predictor of longevity is the number of social interactions you have. Number 2 is the amount of time you spend actually in nature. You know, how many are doing that? We're not going outside. We're in our fluorescent lights all day. We don't even see nature. I was in New York City lecturing last week. I'm like, God, there's not even trees around me. And then she gets to Central Park, there was no trees around. I couldn't. So you need to be in nature probably every day, getting light exposure, being around the energy of trees and plants. And then the last one is we're retiring people at 65, which is just dumb. And because purpose is the 3rd predictor. So we have these 3 things that we're spending a lot of time talking about, supplements and all these things. And the 3 top predictors have nothing to do with that. And we ignore that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's that piece of purpose. The woman at my front desk is 75 years old. She is the most amazing employee that I have. She's dedicated. She shows up to work every day. She knows how to interact with people. She's amazing. But we have all these 75-year-olds who are doing nothing, and they're this hugely valuable resource. So we can't no longer have purpose. We hit 65, we retire, and I don't care if you like, oh my God, I love being retired, but you've got to find a purpose. And I think that is this purpose-driven life is so important. So I really want to encourage people that do this fancy stuff. It's cool. I think it's important, but keep in mind the things that are probably even the bigger predictors.
I think that's absolutely fabulous. And you didn't mention sleep. You didn't mention food. Right.
Like, and those are these things. We know sleep and exercise, but it really is these things we forget, right? We hear sleep all the time, and exercise and weightlifting, super important. Yeah. But if you don't have socialization in your life, none of it matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Yurth. Your information has been changing lives, I'm telling you. I know for me. And one of the main things is what's missing from my body before I put something in.
Actually need. And why is it dropping? Why do I need this?
Yeah. What's the root of the thing?
What's the root of it? Right, exactly.
The symptom.
The cellular reason.
Yes. Okay, so your website for people that want to learn more is the Boulder Longevity Institute, if I have that correctly.
Yeah, or just boulderlongevity.com.
Oh, .com. Okay,
yep. Boulderlongevity.com. Or the academy is bli.academy.
Yeah, and that academy, I'm thinking I might have to join because
You should
I
join.
read.
It's very fun.
Thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on. And people, I'll be back next week with another fabulous guest.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.